You guys asked me, how can an introvert enjoy their alone time without feeling lonely, isolated, and disconnected? Once again, this is an excellent question. I am very grateful for the opportunity to help you navigate it, and I have some ideas for you. Specifically, I have three ideas. In my personal and professional experience, there are three reasons why a person might struggle with this. One is an inability to experience solitude without experiencing it as disconnection or feeling left out. The second is what are called pendulum style boundaries. And the third is caving to social pressure and overriding one's needs. I'm going to describe each of these one by one and then talk about what to do about it if that happens to be the problem that you face. The first one, loneliness versus solitude. All people, to some degree, need a balance of time with others versus time by themselves. An extrovert needs more time with others than they need time by themselves, and an introvert needs the opposite. Specifically, introverted people need alone time to unwind and to recharge, and they find being with people and interacting with others, even people that they really like or love, to be draining or exhausting to some degree. It feels like work, it feels like a performance, it feels like effort, and they only have so much gas in their social tank, so to speak, before they need to take a break, rest, and recover. However, when you aren't with other people, your only company is yourself. And so all of your social needs are being met by you. And the only voice generally that you are hearing, the only person who is commenting on how you're doing or how your life is going or what's happening is you. And many of us, especially those of us who experience conditions like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, PTSD, we all have a tendency to be very harsh with ourselves, very shaming, very judgmental. And as a result, we are forced to choose between being with other people, which is exhausting, or being with ourselves, which is essentially like being locked in a room with your own biggest critic. And it ends up being this sort of pick your poison, lose lose proposition where you're essentially trying to find a balance between these two relatively unpleasant scenarios, neither of which ever feels quite right to you. As far as we know, people don't appear to be able to really change their introversion or extroversion status. At this point in psychological research, these are generally considered to be unchanging personality traits and are just sort of baked into who you are, the same way that, like, your height might be, for example. So if you were born an introvert, you're probably always going to be an introvert. If you were born an extrovert, you're probably always going to be an extrovert. So if you're an introvert, you can't change the fact that other people are some degree of tiring to you and that you do need this alone time, which means our only way out of this pattern for you is going to be to work on your relationship with yourself. There are many ways a person can do this. I've covered this fairly in depth in other videos, primarily the video I have called 4 Ways to Heal Your Relationship with Yourself. But I want to give you guys something new here today so this isn't redundant content. Another way that you can work on your relationship with yourself that I have not discussed in this format before. So, sort of a combination visualization exercise slash internal monologue. So, imagine you meet a person you don't know. You have no data on this person, you have no strong feelings, positive or negative, about them. And over the course of meeting this person and starting up a conversation with them, they share with you in an appropriate and non-trauma dumping kind of way, which may be unrealistic, I know, but bear with me. Every single thing that you know about yourself. So you have all of the history on this person who was a stranger before they told you all this, as you do on yourself. So you essentially know their entire life minus the gaps in memory that we all have. And their life is exactly the same as yours. They have been through every single hardship and up and down, and trauma and wounding that you have been through. They have your same emotional reactions to situations. They have your same hopes, your same dreams, and they're at the same place in pursuing those dreams as you are. They are you, but in a different body. How would you talk to this person? Not just right then and there, like not just what would you say to them in response to learning all this about them, although that is also something I want you to consider. But if you were in a long-term relationship with this person, if they became, let's say, your best friend, how would you treat them? How would you speak to them? What would your tone of voice be? What would your wording choices be? What would you choose to focus on in your conversations? What would your ratio be of trying to point out shortcomings or criticize them versus trying to lift them up, trying to support them, trying to help them? And whatever you identify you think would be the best, most effective, and most helpful way for you to interact with this person to the best of your ability, I want you to try to make your inner dialogue with yourself match that. Because what you've identified in this exercise is what you actually need. Those are your needs. Specifically, those are probably your unmet needs, needs that the people around you aren't meeting very well. If you're an introvert, you're going to be responsible for meeting a higher proportion of your own needs than an extrovert is. An extrovert gets more of that from other people because they're around other people more. You are more self-reliant, or at least you have to be more self-reliant. Because if you're an introvert and you don't have a decently healthy relationship with yourself, you just don't get your needs met because you're not probably going to be spending enough time around other people to really get all those needs met socially. The volume just isn't there. So I believe it's important for all people to have healthy, respectful relationships with themselves, but it is extra important for an introvert because you are a larger percentage of your social network. So really, really try to work on matching your inner dialogue with yourself to what you've identified through this exercise that it would ideally need to be. The second pattern I see that really gets in the way of introverts being able to enjoy and benefit from alone time is extreme bouncing back and forth between different boundary styles. Your psychosocial boundaries are essentially a representation of how much you let in and how much you let out when you're interacting with other people. Someone who has a very, very firm boundary is someone who is pretty to themselves and doesn't let much in, doesn't let much out. Some people have very porous boundaries and they let a lot in and they let a lot out. And these are just sort of relational patterns that we fall into. Generally speaking, the more wounding and trauma and dysfunction that we have experienced in relationships with other people, the more extreme our boundary styles become. But they can be pushed in either direction because both extremes, walling yourself off from the world or engaging in extreme people pleasing and passive communication, these are both social methods of seeking safety. The person who goes more towards porous boundaries and passive communication is trying to find safety by keeping everyone around them happy at all times. Because they believe if everyone is happy and content and no one is mad at them or irritated with them, that they will be safe. The person who walls themselves off from the world simply believes that the fewer interactions they have with other people and the less they put themselves into those interactions or let things in that people say or do, the safer they will be. Unfortunately, both of these extreme boundary styles have pretty significant drawbacks. And I often see people spend some certain amount of time in one extreme, start to feel the negative effects of that extreme, and then jump to the opposite extreme. For example, let's say that you recently experienced major hurt or wounding in a relationship. And as a response to this hurt, this almost unbearable pain, you just withdraw from the world. You pull yourself away from society, maybe not physically, because you may not have that luxury. You may still have to go to work, go to school, take care of your kids. But in terms of your emotional investment in relationships, it's not there. You're like a robot. You're a hollow shell and you're not really connecting with other people. You're there, but you're not there. And you live this way for some certain period of time, and it kind of accomplishes its goal. You feel safe. What other people say or do when you're in this state is of pretty little consequence to you. And so you do really succeed in not being hurt by other people. But every day, that soul crushing loneliness gets heavier and heavier on your heart. And at some point, you just can't take it anymore. And you say, I need to get back out into the world. I need to have relationships again. I can't keep living like this. But you're so starved and you're so desperate for connection and communication that the next time you have an opportunity to bond or connect with someone, you overdo it. You overshare, get attached a little too easily. The relationship, whether it's friend, romantic, whatever, moves a little bit too quickly beyond the point at which the safety of the relationship has really earned. And then at some point, hurt occurs again because things went too fast. And when that hurt occurs again, you say, oh, I was right all along. I should have stayed in my castle of safety. Being in the world and interacting with people is a mistake. And you withdraw again. And you go back and forth between these extremes, both of which to some degree are ultimately dysfunctional. If this pattern describes you, what I want you to try to do, and this is easier said than done, I know, but try to aim for the middle. If you visualize these boundary styles as being on a continuum, here's the castle, here's people pleasing. Try to aim for the 50th percentile between those extremes, where there's some degree of investment and emotional availability in your relationships, but you are keeping some for yourself as well. And you're not putting your whole heart and soul into every single relationship you have and completely discarding or discrediting yourself. The third pattern I see that I think really gets in the way of people being able to get what they need from their alone time is overriding your own genuine needs. I myself am guilty of this. As a mental health professional, I am very aware of the incredible body of research that suggests people need healthy relationships and people need some degree of socializing in order to feel happy and fulfilled and be mentally healthy. And I don't disagree with this research, but I do think that these terms, by the time that they reach the general public, are often oversimplified. Having a healthy social life is something that can look very, very different from one person to the next. And I think when I hear the term healthy social life or healthy relationships, honestly, I picture an extrovert, and maybe this is just my own bias. But I picture someone with a really vibrant, active, exciting social life who's going out a lot and has a big network of friends. And the truth is, that's not what all of us need. That's not even what all of us want. I do think there are very, very few people who could be happy if they were truly alone. I mean, alone in like a raised by wolves scenario, like you don't interact with other people. But I think there is a large amount of people whose social needs are relatively low and realistically are probably met or sometimes even exceeded by the amount of socialization that is just built into most of our lives. Even if you don't seek out a friend group, you socialize. Almost certainly you socialize. If you work, you socialize. If you go to school, you socialize. Even if you go to stores and things like that, like to some degree, even minimally, you socialize. And I do believe that for a fairly large chunk of the population, the social demands of simply existing and like getting stuff done in your life actually give you enough slash more than enough socialization to completely fill your people cup. I would put myself in this category. For a long time, I just thought I was supposed to have all these really like exciting, fun relationships outside of work. But here's the thing, my job is very social. I connect with people all day long. It's not a friend relationship, but it is a relationship. I spend the majority of my day talking to people. I also do this, and I consider you guys to be a part of my social network. I look at your comments. I create content based on what seem to be the most pressing issues on your hearts. Sometimes I respond to the comments. I know I could do a better job of that. I go to Walmart. I have a family, and honestly, all of this, that's all I need. That's been one of my biggest lessons of probably the last decade of my life is that that fills my cup. And every time I think I'm supposed to have more than that, and I try to have friends, above and beyond like colleagues and family and stuff like that, I always end up feeling stretched too thin. And my conclusion has been, I don't think I need that. And I don't want you guys, if you identify with me in that regard, to let others pressure you into thinking you're supposed to be somebody you're not. Because what I noticed kept happening for me, and I'm betting a lot of you guys can relate to this, is that anytime I was experiencing solitude, if I was alone and unwinding and recharging and relaxing, I always felt this twinge of guilt. Like, you should be being social right now. You're being antisocial by being alone. Part of this might have a little to do with my own backstory because I did massively withdraw from the world for a long period of time to a degree that legitimately was unhealthy. So maybe I've still kind of got that in the back of my mind and I want to make sure I'm not doing it again. But the amount that I interact with people every day is about the right amount for me. And so I don't need to add a bunch of other stuff onto that in order to get my balance right. My balance, I think, is pretty ideal the way it's set up now. If that's you, don't let the world tell you that's not who you're supposed to be. We live in I was gonna say we live in a society. That's like a meme. It's like a cringe meme or something. So I'm trying to reword it. But like the world is getting more and more social all the time. I mean, especially with like social media and smartphones, like we are more and more connected. I feel like the world is just getting more and more geared towards extroverts, and it's becoming harder and harder to truly experience solitude. And so I think the days when even an introvert, needs to have at least two or three friends to like go out with from time to time, we're so connected all the time. I don't know that we need that like we used to. Some of us still do. The extroverts do, and that's fine. But if you're on the introverted side of things, maybe life just gives you enough or more than you can handle sometimes. So if this describes you, then your solution is to just work on accepting and honoring who you are, not trying to be somebody you're not, and not letting the world tell you that there's something wrong with the fact that you're an introvert and that you need this time for yourself in a growingly, ongoingly more connected and social world. The tides are kind of moving against us introverts a little bit, and that's hard. So I think we might need to be constantly redefining what healthy relationships mean to us in that context. I hope this was helpful. Take care, and I'll see you next time.